Hello everyone, in this video I'm interviewing Herantis CEO Craig Cook. Craig, how are you?
Fine, thank you, and you, Verneri?
Fine, thank you. First question, let's talk about Parkinson disease treatment CDNF. First, could you refresh my memory and maybe serve possible new investors in Herantis Pharma by reminding us what's CDNF about?
Yes, so CDNF stands for cerebral dopamine neurotrophic factor. And that is, it's a natural protein that occurs naturally in the body and whose natural role in the body is to protect neurons. And Herantis has taken that protective potential, that natural protective potential, and looking to harness that as a treatment for chronic neurodegenerative diseases such as Parkinson's disease. And the intention is to develop CDNF as a disease-modifying therapy that doesn't only treat the symptoms of the disease, but it also treats the cause of the disease. Most of the current therapies today, or all of the current therapies today in Parkinson's, treat symptoms only. And the mainstay of therapy today is the same as what it was in the mid-1900s, all focused on symptoms. But for Herantis and CDNF, we're looking to also treat the cause of the disease, such that we can slow the disease, stop, or even potentially reverse the disease pathology with CDNF.
Last November, you decided to change the administration method of CDNF, and later you partnered with the Finnish company Nanoform. Where are we now with CDNF?
Yeah, so if you recall, in the phase 1, we used a invasive intracranial device that required surgery to drill a hole in the patient's skull and implant it deep into the patient's brain to deliver CDNF. So there's clearly issues with that from the patient perspective, the physician perspective, regulator perspective, potential pharmaceutical partners. There were lots of issues related to that. So we made a decision to evaluate alternative administration routes, specifically intranasal, so nose to brain administration for chronic neurodegenerative conditions, as well as subcutaneous with injection via the skin for administering CDNF. And these programs have been ongoing for a couple of years, and it was a clear decision to make at that point, at the end of last year, to focus on these administration routes specifically. And as a result of the dedicated fundraise that we conducted in December of last year, we've been able to not only continue, but accelerate those programs with these alternative administration routes. And the key premise of these administration routes moving forward is, number one, that we're backing CDNF as a standalone product without the need for surgery. That's a key thing, because we're going to be administering it without surgery. Number two, the program, it will accelerate the development program because we don't have this complicated surgical device in the equation. And number three, very importantly, it will allow us to focus on earlier stage patients, because with the surgical device, the regulators forced us, and ethically, we would have to focus on late stage patients only. Now, with late stage patients, the dopaminergic neurons, the neurons that are the pathology in Parkinson's, they're already dead, and it's not possible to replenish that. CDNF works on neurons that are declining or deteriorating, and it turns them around to replenish and regenerate those neurons. So we need to get in, and as with any therapy, we need to get in earlier to these patients. So this will expand the patient population beyond just advanced patients and allow us to focus on earlier stage patients as well. And in the intranasal administration, as you mentioned, Nanoform. Nanoform is one of the partners for the intranasal administration. They're an innovative nanoparticle medicine-enabling company. And in parallel to Herantis's ongoing intranasal program that's been running for a couple of years. The Nanoform project will run in parallel and assess possible enhancement of the intranasal delivery to the brain of CDNF therapy for Parkinson's disease using their biological nanoparticle technology. So the collaboration complements Herantis' current development program. And under the agreement, Nanoform will perform 2 proof of concept formulation studies that have already kicked off, and the project has started and is ongoing. And we're looking to make significant progress in the first half of this year.
Some investors have said that this means a bit delay or loss of momentum for CDNF, but you talk about acceleration. So could you give us some idea where should we expect more news, or how are you progressing with CDNF?
Yeah, so for CDNF or CDNF?
CDNF.
CDNF, yeah. So yes, it will accelerate the program because we don't have this complicated and invasive surgical device in the equation anymore. So we don't need long, the studies that the surgical device would have needed would have been long, complicated, expensive, difficult to run. Regulators would have made us, would have required us to jump through lots of obstacles. Plus it's not very patient friendly. The partners didn't like it. So this will accelerate that because we don't have to deal with that. And the studies can be quicker, cheaper, and simpler than if we were doing it with a device. So the plan moving forward is that we will spend this year focusing on the formulations and the preclinical studies. 2022 will be about toxicology and IND enabling prior to us getting back into the clinic thereafter.
It seems there are growing interest among investors on Parkinson's disease. As you said, there hasn't been too much development in that field for many years, and a number of companies with strong financial resources are competing in the same field as Herantis. So one investor asks, could you comment how Herantis and its research development is positioned compared to other companies such as Yumanity Therapeutics or Denali Therapeutics?
Yeah, so the key pathology in many neurodegenerative diseases is due to dysfunction of a protective mechanism called or referred to as proteostasis. And this is a key system in the body that sustains many functions and structures in the brain. And within this proteostasis, there are different components that make up the entire proteostasis system. So there's lots of different aspects of the full proteostasis system. I won't go into detail in that regard, but what I will say is that companies like Yumanity and Denali are focused on certain key aspects of the proteostasis system and doing great work. Whereas for Herantis, we are focused on addressing and tackling the entire proteostatic system as a whole. So we don't only focus on certain discrete components, we address the entire proteostatic system. So from our perspective, we are in good company with the companies like you mentioned, Yumanity, who are in collaboration with Merck in a $500 million deal, Denali, who are in collaboration with Biogen. There are also others, Prothena and Roche, have also entered into a $500 million licensing deal. There's also Google and Calico. Google have invested $2.5 billion in this space. So these are potential collaborators or partners for Herantis moving forward. It's a hot area of biotech, and it's holding a lot of promise in the pharmaceutical and research fraternity, with an enormous amount of promise.
You described the amount of money that people are investing in. There are quite huge sums. I don't know if you can answer this, but can you describe, are there many people behind your door knocking in and, hey, can we give you some more money?
Well, I think as with any biotech, we have ongoing discussions and ongoing dialogue all the time with potential partners. And all I will say is that we're in a good space in proteostasis. And what we're seeing with CDNF and ex-CDNF is impressive indeed.
Lastly, about CDNF, could you give us an update about ex-CDNF?
Yeah, so ex-CDNF is an engineered peptide. So whereas CDNF is the parent molecule is a biological natural protein, with ex-CDNF, this is an engineered compound that we have taken the smallest, most potent fragments of CDNF, and we've chemically synthesized that into a new molecule or new chemical entity. And we've made since the dedicated fundraise in December, we've been allowed to clearly, or it's enabled us to accelerate the program and the development of ex-CDNF. And quite importantly and excitingly, we have generated impressive data confirming the potency of the compound in terms of protecting neurons, plus its ability to cross the blood-brain barrier. So it can reach the brain tissue and do the job that it's required to do. And the latest data shows impressive effect on neuronal survival. It shows impressive effect on alpha-synuclein reduction, which is one of the bad proteins that cause these diseases. So we've shown impressive reduction with ex-CDNF on alpha-synuclein, as well as on biomarker findings. So we've generated data where we see markers of disease actually reduce as a result of treatment or administration of ex-CDNF in these preclinical studies. And this is precisely what ex-CDNF was engineered to achieve. This is why we started the program, and this is what we needed to achieve to make it feasible and take further into development. So it's a very exciting time for ex-CDNF with all this data coming through.
Let's move to lymfactin. Herantis published results about phase 2 study just yesterday, that perhaps were not a case for celebration and left the future of lymfactin development open, I could say. What were the results, and why did you discover differences between treatment groups only after the study had begun? What was behind that?
Yeah, so this was, so as you say, we announced this yesterday, and it certainly was disappointing. So lymfactin is a unique gene therapy, and it induces something called VEGF-C, vascular endothelial growth factor C, which is responsible for driving the growth and regeneration of lymphatic vessels. Now, just as a reminder, the target indication here was lymphedema as it relates to breast cancer. So when patients, breast cancer surgery patients come in for treatment, they often have a mastectomy, and at the same time, they have the lymph nodes removed from their armpit to prevent further spread of the regional cancer. And lymphatics in the arm drain the fluid. So just like the venous system in the arm drains blood out of the arm back into the body, lymphatics drain fluid and lymph out of the arm back into the body. So if these lymphatics are removed, then it causes problems in the arm. The fluid's got nowhere to go. It becomes painful, swollen. It's debilitating for these patients. And in severe cases, the treatment for that is surgery to try and repair or replenish the lymphatic system. And the primary purpose of the study, the phase 2 study with lymfactin, was to determine whether there was an incremental benefit, an additional benefit of lymfactin treatment in combination with the surgery, compared to just surgery alone. So there were two groups in the study. There was one group that just got surgery, and there was another group that got surgery plus lymfactin. And there were two main outcome measures. One is the volume reduction in the arm as a result of the treatment, and quality of life improvements in the patients. So two groups: surgery only, surgery plus lymfactin, and looking at volume reduction and quality of life. And the results showed that while both treatment groups overall experienced clear clinical benefits. It was not possible to draw any conclusions about the incremental benefits specific to lymphactin in combination with surgery compared to surgery alone. So on that basis, it was inconclusive. And there were two main reasons for this. The first was differences between the treatment groups at the start of the study, at baseline, in terms of arm volume and quality of life. And this is despite the fact that the patients were enrolled into the study according to very strict inclusion criteria. They were then randomized into different groups. So they were random. So randomization is when you assign patients to different groups, and it's purely based on a system that is completely random. So there's no bias in any of the groups. And despite this, what we see in the data is that the baseline characteristics of the patients, both in terms of the arm volume and in terms of the quality of life, were very, very different. And that makes it not possible to actually reliably assess whether there was a treatment effect due to lymphactin. The second reason for the inconclusive outputs of the study is that with the measures of volume reduction, this was one of the primary endpoints. From the data, the measurement of the volume reduction was inconsistent and unreliable. So both of these factors, in particular, the difference between the treatment groups at the start of study baseline, because that's essential to draw any conclusions in the study. And the fact that that wasn't the case were somewhat unexpected and quite surprising, and made it very difficult to accurately assess the treatment response of lymphactin specifically. So very disappointing that we couldn't draw conclusions. We're not sure why this happened. It's very unusual. It was a surprising outcome to everyone, including the Herantis team, including the principal investigators and investigators on the study, as well as our statisticians. So moving forward, we now have a piece of work planned for the next quarter, where we'll examine the data in more detail and subgroups, and we'll examine the various factors that I've just discussed. We'll look at the program in detail, and at that point, we expect to be able to update the market on how we intend to move the program forward. So it was a pioneering study, nothing like which has been done before. So there's no template in this indication, in this treatment, which is something we need to remember. But we're going to work through an important piece of work now to understand it in more detail, both the study as well as the program. And obviously, we want to thank the patients that participated in this study, which was an intensive study, and we're most grateful for that.
Of course. So you're learning as you move forward, so to speak.
Well, in some, yes. So in some respects, that's true, and especially since it's a pioneering study, it's a trailblazing study. So there are certainly going to be learnings that we need to look into.
How do you view that? Of course, every time you do studies, that costs some money, quite a lot, maybe. And Herantis is quite a small company, and you're riding with two horses. And now the lymphactin horse seems to be a bit, how to say, not tired, but he's got some problems, let's say so. So how do you manage with two horses? Should you focus only on one?
Well, I think the in the past, what we've seen in the past year in Herantis is an optimization of our assets and our portfolio and our strategy, and that will continue during the course of this year as we optimize the strategy and the portfolio to make sure that we create value, deliver value, and focus on the most value-adding aspects for our assets. So that's work in progress, and clearly this new data is going to be a key part of that.
Then a few questions about regarding financial resources. You had 2 rounds of private placements last year. The first one was in the spring and the last one on December. I think the last one was a bit of surprise for some investors because you still had quite nice amount of cash in the bank. So could you give us some flavor? Why did you decide to raise cash just before lymphacting study results? Of course, in hindsight, we can say that that was a very smart move, but you couldn't know it beforehand, I think.
So I think the first thing to state is that the fundraise in December was dedicated for CDNF and ex-CDNF. None of the use of proceeds from that fundraise were for the lymphactin program. We wanted to wait for the lymphactin data before deciding on potential fundraise for lymphactin. So the fundraise in December was limited and focused on CDNF and ex-CDNF. And the key drivers for a fundraise at that point in time is that we wanted to and needed to continue and accelerate the CDNF and ex-CDNF R&D programs. We also had, from an accounting perspective, we had ongoing concern requirements from the auditors that we needed to address. And finally, from a corporate perspective, we also wanted to avoid getting too close to cash out. The previous cash out date would have been mid-2021. So we didn't want to get too close to that. So those were the real three drivers for CDNF, ex-CDNF to accelerate the R&D, number one, number two, to address the growing concern requirements, and number three, avoid getting too close to cash out. So from my perspective, the merits were crystal clear that a fundraise was needed at that point.
Then last question about fundraising. For early stage biotech companies like you, the process of raising cash, it's quite, one could describe game-ish in a sense that you need good news and progress to get more higher share price, so that then you can raise more fund and not dilute your share count that much. On the other hand, you can have a negative spiral when you have bad news, you need more money, and of course investors won't give that in a high share price, so your share count is going to explode in a very short matter of time. So how do you view this dynamic, and how well positioned Herantis for the future in financial sense?
Yeah, so the biotech industry generally is potentially a very rewarding industry, but it's also quite risky because we're dealing with human well-being, we're dealing with treatments for diseases, we're dealing with the human body, and one can never be sure of how the human body will respond to a drug molecule. So for this reason, we're very aware of this within Herantis, and that's why, as I mentioned earlier, we've really focused on the last over the last year or so, and for this year as well, moving forward, is making sure that the fundamentals of our programs and our portfolios are optimized. And that will continue because we need to shape and prepare for the future. And related to that, we have potentially rich news flow over the next 12 to 18 months that will identify and create value in our assets and portfolio. And hopefully that will be reflected in our share price at some point as well, which will then strengthen our financial dynamic, as you say, and positioning for future potential fundraisers. As of now, we have runway that extends into early 2022. So we're fairly well funded at this point in time, but clearly we need to consider that as part of the equation in the optimization and shaping the programs and portfolios for the future.
Thank you very much for the interview, and all the best for this year.
Thank you, Verneri. Thanks for your time. You too. Bye.